None of that is legal. Don't have to have them. Shuttlesworth versus City of Birmingham, Alabama. If the state converts a right, liberty, into a privilege, the citizen can ignore the license and fee and engage in the right, liberty, with impunity. Elmer versus McCammon. The right, Sims versus Ahearns. The practice of law is an occupation of common right. Because of what appears to be a lawful command on the surface, many citizens, because of their respect for what appears to be any judge who does not comply with his oath to the Constitution of the United States, wars against the Constitution, and engages in acts in violation of the supreme law of the land. The judge is engaged in acts of treason. The United States Supreme Court has stated that no state legislator or executive or judicial officer can war against the Constitution without violating its undertaking to support it. Schuer versus Rhodes. By law, a judge is a state officer. The judge then acts not as a judge, but as a private individual in person. When a judge acts as a trespasser of the law, when a judge does not follow the law, the judge loses subject matter jurisdiction, and the judge's orders are not voidable but void, and of no legal force or effect. The United States Supreme Court stated that when a state officer acts under a state law in a manner violated to the federal Constitution, he comes into conflict with the superior authority of that Constitution, and he is, in that case, stripped of his official and representative character, and is subjected in his person to the consequences of his individual conduct. The state has no power to impart to him any immunity for responsibility to the supreme authority of the United States. Miller versus U.S. Can be no sanction or penalty imposed upon one because of his exercise of constitutional rights. Murdoch versus Pennsylvania. No state has the power to impart to him any immunity for responsibility to the supreme authority of the United States. Miller versus U.S. Can be no sanction or penalty imposed upon one because of his exercise of constitutional rights. Murdoch versus Pennsylvania. No state shall convert a liberty into a license and charge a fee therefor. Let's say it again. Murdoch versus Pennsylvania. No state shall convert a liberty into a license and charge a fee therefor. Fishing licenses, hunting license, driver's license, license plates. None of that is legal. Don't have to have them. Shuttlesworth versus City of Birmingham, Alabama. If the state converts a right, liberty, no state shall convert a liberty into a license and charge a fee therefor. Let's say it again. Murdoch versus Pennsylvania. No state shall convert a liberty into a license and charge a fee therefor. Fishing licenses, hunting license, driver's license, license plates. None of that is legal. Don't have to have them. Shuttlesworth versus City of Birmingham, Alabama. If the state converts a right, liberty, into a privilege, the citizen can ignore the license and fee and engage in the right liberty with impunity. Elmer versus McCammon. The right, Sims versus Ahern's. The practice of law is an occupation of common right. Because of what appears to be a lawful command on the surface, many citizens, because of their respect for what appears to be law, are cunningly coerced into waiving their rights due to ignorance. Let me say that again. It says a lot in that statement. The practice of law is an occupation of common right. Because of what appears to be a lawful command on the surface, many citizens, because of their respect for what appears to be law, are cunningly coerced into waiving their rights due to ignorance. Appears to be law. U.S. versus Minker. Supreme Court of the United States, inasmuch as every government is an artificial person, an abstraction, and a creature of the mind only, a government can interface only with another artificial person, the imaginary, having neither actuality nor substance, is foreclosed from creating and attaining parity with the tangible. The legal manifestation of this is that no government, as well as any law, agency, court, etc., can concern itself with anything other than corporate, artificial persons and the contracts between them. So, when we were born as American state citizens, American state nationals, and they created a birth certificate and misled our parents. Our parents signed as an informant on the birth certificate. They made us United States citizens. Well, the all caps name is where on the birth certificate and the Social Security card. They're bonds traded on the stock market just thousands of times. They're worth multi-millions of dollars. Those bonds prepay all of your debt. Every loan you ever had has been prepaid by those bonds, and you pay it back. That's a whole nother topic we're not going to get into, but I'll just know that all your debt's been prepaid since 1933, and you never owed anyone anything. You've always been the creditor. But anyways, they created the all caps name on these birth certificates. So if you notice on every financial statement, every bill, every court document, it's the all caps name for the defendant in court, and your loans and stuff. It's all the all caps name. That's because they're corporations, and the U.S. citizen is a corporation, the fictitious entity that they can contract with. They can't contract with you because you're a living person. That's why you need to have an attorney represent you in court, because you can't speak for yourself because you don't exist. You're supposed to be lost at sea in the corrupt system. That's how it is. You know, the deception in words, like a person is in the law, Admiralty Maritime Law, the judicial system we have now. A person is a fictitious entity, a corporation. I mean, we're persons. We think we're persons, but according to the law, no, because they changed that years back so that people would be fooled or be misled, to be able to contract with these people and put people in jail without full disclosure on what is really going on. You know, last I heard, a felony gets, they withdraw $1 million from the Social Security accounts. And the misdemeanors, I don't remember. And it might be a little less and maybe a little more on the felonies. I'm not too sure about that, but I know they withdrawn each, and that's distributed however it's distributed, without ever telling you. They act as trustees to the trust accounts. It's a big mess, and it's sickening. But it's about to be over. Okay. So the living person is the all caps. The fictitious entity is the all caps name they created, and the you're lost at sea with your God-given name, upper and lowercase. What I've done is I've changed my status. I've changed my political status. It's several documents I had to do and get notarized and file with the federal government, state government, district courthouse. And I took my God-given rights back and claimed my birthright back as an American state national. People say that's sovereign citizen. That's bullshit. It's not sovereign citizen. That's, the two words don't even go together. Everyone is sovereign. We were born sovereign. Jesus Christ is sovereign. That's a good thing. That's a great thing. It's freedom. It's being able to do what we were meant to do when we were born on the land as a child, before our rights were stolen, and we were taught wrong from then on. I mean, it's been lie after lie after lie after lie, and everybody's going to be learning that pretty soon. The Great Awakening is happening, and people are learning daily the truths out there of what's really going on, and it's going to floor a lot of people. It's just unbelievable, but it's true, and you'll see. But I'm concerned about this right now because the officers, people are learning this, and the officers need to make some adjustments to stop themselves from getting sued, criminal charges, whatever it may be. If this is important to me, it's important that every officer know this and adjust where it needs to be adjusted. McNally versus U.S. versus Holzer. Fraud, in its elementary common law sense of deceit, includes the deliberate concealment of material information in a setting of a fiduciary obligation. A public official is a fiduciary toward the public. If he deliberately conceals material information from them, he is guilty of fraud. The law requires proof of jurisdiction to appear on the record of the administrative agency and all administrative proceedings. Fiduciary, your trust account, the money, the deception, failure to disclose all of that, failure to disclose that a living person does not have to participate in the courts. They don't have to contract, because every living person is owed natural law, American common law, God's law, not Admiralty maritime law. Higgins versus Levine. A judgment rendered by a court without personal jurisdiction over the defendant is void. It is nullity. Maine versus Tibotot. I don't know. It's Tiboutot. Jurisdiction can be challenged at any time, and jurisdiction, once challenged, cannot be assumed and must be decided, but cannot be decided by the same court. Has to be a different court. Stock versus medical examiners. Where a court's power to act is controlled by statute, the court is governed by the rules of limited jurisdiction. The courts exercising jurisdiction over such matters must proceed within the structures of the statute. The state citizen is immune from any and all government attacks and procedure, absent contract, Dred Scott versus Sanford. Or as the Supreme Court has stated clearly, every man is independent of all laws except those prescribed by nature. He is not bound by any institutions formed by his fellow man without his consent. Now, consent, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you to court of law, so on and so forth. And they understand. Okay, I understand. Okay, that is considered a consent to them. I have a problem with that. Because is it disclosed to that person? Or, excuse me, not a person, because they're a real living person. Is that disclosed to that man or woman that they don't have to consent to anything because they have the right to American common law, and they have the right, constitutional rights that can't be violated? Are they ever told that? Did we ever tell any suspect that? No, we haven't. It's not right. It's horrible what we have been going through, and uneducated, not told. We go to the police academy and it's statute, criminal law, traffic law, criminal law, traffic law, all statutes, and then the city ordinances with their little running the electrical line in the yard or whatever, just stupid stuff, and tearing people's houses down and then billing them for it. That you can't do that. I mean, they're violating the Constitution of the United States of America. These people, with their houses being torn down, have the right to a home. Whatever that home looks like, that's their business. That's their home. City can't just vote and say we're going to go tear it down. No. And that's going to create problems. But for policemen, adjust where it needs to be adjusted. I mean, every one of us are grown men and women and can make bright decisions. I know that most law enforcement is in the profession for the right reason, to help people, because it's a passion. It's something you love to do. It's what I love to do. I'd do anything for anybody. Helping people is just what makes me happy. That's always what I've done. So don't get discouraged. I just think it's important y'all need to know this stuff, because, and you're going to see here a little later, I'm going to keep reading constitutional laws and cases and by the Supreme Court, and it's going to say that all statutes, codes, ordinances are not laws. They're unconstitutional due to lack of due process and not enforceable on the people. None of them, all of them. Okay. So that's a wake up call there, guys. I mean, and who's telling us this? Nobody's telling nobody. It's not being talked about, but they're about to drop the hammer, and people are learning this. I mean, I learned it. It's available for anybody to learn it. The Federation taught me, the United States of America Federation taught me what I'm telling you. Porter versus State. When governments enter the world of commerce, they are subject to the same burdens as any private firm or corporation. U.S. versus Burr. Banks of United States versus Planters Bank of Georgia. Every government, agency in the United States, every police department, every sheriff's office is a corporation. They all have Dun & Bradstreet's numbers. You can look it up on Dun & Bradstreet website, and you'll find they have a Dun & Bradstreet. Every city has a corporate limits, incorporated cities. They're all governments. So what this is saying, Porter versus State, when governments enter the world of commerce, governments becoming corporations, they've entered the world of commerce, they are subject to the same burdens as any private firm or corporation. Think about that for a little while. I mean, I don't have to tell you what I'm thinking. You know what's the deal. Shapiro versus Thompson. Further, the right to travel by private conveyance for private purposes upon common way cannot be infringed. No license or permission is required for travel when such travel is not for the purpose of commercial profit or gain. On the open highways operating under license in commerce, the rights of the individuals are restricted only to the extent they have been voluntarily surrendered by citizenship to the agencies of government. Voluntarily surrendered. Do you know you surrendering your right to travel? You ever told when you go to DMV, I need to do this for full disclosure. I need to tell you, you don't need a driver's license if you're not driving commercially, for hire, driving people, whatever. No, they don't tell you that. It's null and void. It's ridiculous. It's clear as day. There's tons of case laws that state you don't need a license, forced insurance, or registration, or license plate, period. Poindexter versus Greenhow. Brady versus U.S. Waivers of constitutional rights. Not only must they be voluntary, they must be knowingly, intelligent acts done with sufficient awareness. There it is. Never have sufficient awareness. Fraud destroys the validity of everything into which it enters. That is Nudd versus Burroughs. Fraud vitiates everything. U.S. versus Throckmorton. Whereas officials and even judges have no immunity, officials and judges are deemed to know the law and sworn to uphold the law. Officials and judges cannot claim to act in good faith in willful deprivation of law. They certainly cannot plead ignorance of the law. Even the citizen cannot plead ignorance of the law. The courts have ruled there is no such thing as ignorance of the law. It is ludicrous for learned officials and judges to plead ignorance of the law. Therefore, there is no immunity, judicial or otherwise. It matters of rights secured by the Constitution of the United States of America. See Title 42, U.s.a. Section 1983. When lawsuits are brought against officials, they must be brought against them in their individual capacity, not their official capacity. When federal officials perpetrate constitutional torts, they do so ultra vires, beyond the powers, and lose the shield of immunity. William versus the U.S. Department of Agriculture. It is the duty of all officials, whether legislative, judicial, executive, administrative, or ministerial, to so perform every official act as not to violate constitutional provisions. This is Penhallow versus Doan's administrators. The contracts between them involve U.S. citizens which are deemed as corporate entities. Remember, the birth certificate was created and made you a U.S. citizen from an American. The contracts between them involve U.S. citizens which are deemed as corporate entities. Therefore, U.S. citizens residing in one of the states of the Union are classified as property and franchises of the federal government as an individual entity. Wheeling versus Steele Corporation versus Fox. Alexander versus Bosworth. Party cannot be bound by contract that he has not made or authorized. Free consent is an indispensable element in making valid contracts. You have to clearly consent to participate with the police, with the courts, because the system is, they have to try to make it as lawful as possible. It's crazy. Once you learn it and you know, you can't unsee it. You really can't. It's terrible. Let's see. Barbarian versus Lucier. The right of the citizen to drive on the public street with freedom from police interference, unless he is engaged in suspicious conduct associated in some manner with criminality, is a fundamental constitutional right which must be protected by the courts. Let's see. The rights of a citizen to travel. This is Pontius versus McLean. The right of a citizen to travel upon the public highways and to transport his property therein by horse-drawn carriage, wagon, or automobile is not a mere privilege which may be permitted or prohibited at will, but a common right which he has under the right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then there's several other case laws. Same thing, just listed. Edward versus California, Twining versus New Jersey, Williams versus Spears, Crandall versus Nevada, the passenger cases versus Holtard, U.S. versus Guest, Griffin versus Breckenridge, and it goes on and on. No state government entity has the power to allow or deny passage on highways. Travel is not a privilege requiring license, vehicle registration, or forced insurance. Chicago Coach Company versus City of Chicago. The fundamental right to travel is not a privilege. It is a gift granted by your Maker and restated by our founding fathers as unalienable and cannot be taken by any man, government, man-made law, or color of law known as private code, secret, or statute. As general rule, men have natural right to do anything which their inclinations may suggest, if it be not evil in itself and in no way impairs the rights of others. That's Newman, 1858. Traveling is passing from place to place, act, performing journey, and travelers in person who travels. Archie. Traffic infractions are not a crime. People versus battle. The use of a highway for the purpose of travel and transportation is not a mere privilege, but a common and fundamental right of which the public and individuals cannot rightfully be deprived. Chicago Motor Coach versus Chicago. The right of a citizen to travel upon the public highways and to transport his property thereon, either by carriage or automobile, is not a mere privilege which a city may prohibit or permit at will, but a common right which he has under the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thompson versus Smith. Even the legislature has no power to deny to a citizen the right to travel upon the highway and transport his property in the ordinary course of his business or pleasure, though this right may be regulated in accordance with public interest and convenience. Chicago Coach Company versus City of Chicago.